Hey guys, it's Yashua Suarez from Edge Realty. Thanks again for tuning in to our podcast that's still untitled. But we have the one and only Jennifer Nickerson with us here, multi-million-dollar producer, multi-years in a row. And I'm just glad to have you here. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
I'm honored to be here.
Thank you so much. And of course, as always, we got Tracer behind the boards as well, too.
Hello.
So, kind of to give you a little synopsis, we've been doing this, and just what we're trying to do is bring more of a community-based, more information from us directly, straight from the horse's mouth, to everybody that is following us and supports us and stuff like that. So, what we want to do is kind of get also a more insight look of what you do personally when it comes to first-time home buyers. So, if you could kind of take us through the process. I mean, even actually, before we even do that, let's go give a little backstory about yourself at first, if we can do that, and then just kind of say, how you started and how you got into it, where you came from before that.
Okay. How far back do I need to
go? Let's go back because you used to be in title.
When I was a child.
Escrow.
No, okay.
So I rose from the womb.
Yes, as I came out of the womb. I always wanted to be a realtor. No, I grew up in this business. My grandfather was a developer in Cabot. He actually built some of the first all-electric homes, which I always thought was really cool.
That is neat.
Yeah.
That tells how far back he went. But anyway, so then I got in this business with a bank, a local bank. It used to be called Bank of Cabot, and then it became Community Bank. And I worked for a little mortgage company called Community Home Lenders in the late 90s. And I started out like low man on the totem pole, shipper, which is really good because you actually see the whole transaction after it's been, you get it after closing.
Yeah.
And review everything. So I learned what a title commitment was, and I learned all of these mortgage documents and what they meant. And I just received extensive training. And I worked directly with HUD programs and different investors. So I learned a lot, even though I was the
you're right.
The little man.
You were on the outside, but
yes.
you had to review everything to be able to understand everything.
It was pretty cool. And so we also wound up doing a lot of quality control there for state audits. So I learned a lot in that part of it. And then moving on into escrow from there, where I worked in the title side and wrote policies for an abstract company in Little Rock. Shout out to American Abstract. And love those guys. Oh my gosh. But anyway, so worked there for about 7 years as a policy writer. Felt like it was time to, again, make that step up. So I became an escrow officer. Loved it. During the mortgage crisis of 2008, the little, private title company I worked for closed their doors. And so I jumped into the asset management side of the business, which also gave me a ton of knowledge and experience that I hadn't had before. Because, when you're in your 20s, sometimes you think you know it all. So I was like, look out, here I come. And then I got into asset management. I'm like, I don't even know what am I doing, And so it was a learning curve again, but I gained so much knowledge doing that. And I also began to talk with the consumer a lot more in that experience. So it was kind of a sad, interesting time during that mortgage crisis, but we made it through it. And then I went back into escrow, and seeing the way that agents, I developed closer relationships with the agents as an escrow officer than I ever had before. And just seeing the way that they were with their clients, it felt right. I'm like, this is what I need to do. I need to be a real estate agent. I need to be on the other side of this all. And so here I am.
So you were liking the relationships more.
Yes, I would sit at the closing table because me. I mean, I will talk to a rock. So where, all these people would come into closing and they were so excited and their agent was excited. And it's like they all worked so hard to get there. And I saw the reward there. Even though I was like this small part of it, I'm like, man, I want to be a bigger part of this.
Yeah.
And because it was like my job wasn't challenging anymore. Clearly, I had been doing it for a really long time. Yeah. And I want that. I'm always seeking that challenge.
Absolutely.
And so that's what led me to this.
Never settling. That's awesome.
Yeah, never settling. Yeah. Of course, meeting JC when he was a rookie, agent, and just so awesome. I loved him. I mean, I still love him, but yeah, just working with him, I'm like, man, this kid is going places. Sorry, I called you a kid. And when he came to me and said, I'm fixing to open my own brokerage, I'm like, hot dog, I'm in. I'm like, I'm doing this. I'm doing it.
That's
So
awesome. So yeah, Jennifer's actually been here. If you didn't know, Jennifer's been here with Edge since the beginning.
almost.
She was like one of
Yeah,
the
there
one of
was
the
like
first
2 or
agents.
3 months I think before. Yeah.
Yeah, like, but she was here with like when there was only like 7 of you, like or
Yeah,
not even that. I think it was like 5 of you. I think
yeah,
before.
From the
we were
ground
From the
up.
ground,
ground
yeah.
up,
There was like
yeah.
5 of them, I think, that started all together, and now look, we're at almost
I know.
over 50.
It's
That's
awesome.
crazy.
It is
But yeah, talk a
awesome.
little about that. Like as far as like going from the beginning to now, like what's the biggest thing that's changed other than obviously like volume?
From like 2016 to now.
Yeah.
What's changed for me personally, I guess.
Well,
or-
the company itself.
Oh, the company. I mean, we've grown so much, and the market changed from then till now. I remember when JC and I were having a conversation about like what do we need to do to stand out. Our service is great, we know that, but what do we need to do to stand out against the rest? And the videos were not. No one was doing videos, and I remember thinking, I've got to do this. And so if I look back now on my Facebook page, I'm a little embarrassed at some of the videos I made because I'm like in my car and I'm like, guess where I'm at? Which I still do that every now and then. But, I didn't know what to say, but I knew that I just had to stop being a chicken and do it.
Yeah.
And so, I started doing the videos and that kind of caught on. People were watching them. I'm like, people really want to see what I have to say? Like, okay.
Yeah.
So then I realized it was being informative. Like I needed to be informative.
Yeah, the educated agent.
Yes.
Hit him with a little Tom Ferry.
That's right.
Yeah, I
absolutely,
love Tom
absolutely.
Ferry. Don't get me started on Tom Ferry.
Or a little Gary Vee,
Speaking-
be your digital mayor. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? we can go for days about that. So like, see, all right. So let's hold off on talking too much about that because I do want to have a complete segment of just that.
Right.
That's gonna be a later date. But yes, I'm gonna write that on the board actually before
Yeah,
I
that's
forget
a
to
good
as
idea.
well. But yeah, let's
Let's
hold off.
segue
Let's segue
the
into kind of-
first time home buyers.
Right
Yes,
into the first time
sorry.
home buyer. No, you're
No,
fine.
you're
You're
good.
fine.
We love the beginning.
Right, that's the
Perfect.
you just inspired me to do a whole other segment with you. So, but what I really want to get into, like I said, is getting your process that you like to take your first time home buyers through to make them feel more educated, make them feel more put the ball in their court, if so to speak. So, right off the bat, when you first meet somebody, they're brand new, they don't know what they're doing, they're maybe even a little scared, a little
They are.
overwhelmed. What is it that you tell them to kind of give them more knowledge and make them feel like, this is possible for you, this is something
Right.
that is not unobtainable to you?
Right. Can I just say, I'll start by saying this and then I'll answer that question. When I first went into this and I had a different mentality with home buyers, obviously my inexperience, helped that with that issue. But it wasn't, I was having a lot of problems with buyers not telling me what they wanted, or I thought that's what the problem was. So,
Okay.
and then a lot of agents, I'm sure you've heard it too. Like it's a thing a lot of agents throw around as buyers are liars.
Gotcha.
So, which I
We've all heard it.
do not like that.
Right. I'm not a fan
and
of
at
that
first,
either.
when I heard it, I laughed about it, and I'm like, "Yeah, it's probably true," or whatever. But so in the back of my mind, I didn't realize I had that mentality going into
Yeah, subconsciously.
Yes, and so I remember when I did hire a coach. Tom Ferry coach. When I did hire a coach, which is the best thing that I could have ever done for my career and for myself. But I was talking to him one day and I was like, this buyer just backed out on a deal and I can't believe it. And I said, they say buyers are liars. And he goes, stop right there. And I was like, what? And he's like, do you hear yourself? Do you hear your mentality? And he's like, are you serving your buyers? Did you ever stop and think that maybe they're not lying to you, but maybe you haven't been listening to them,
Yeah.
or given them the opportunity to tell you what they really want, or that maybe they're not comfortable telling you what they want because you didn't build rapport with them and you weren't honest and direct with them? And I'm like,
And
You
it's
know,
a perspective.
it
That
is.
perspective change can change the game completely.
yes. And then I'm like, I do that with everybody else. Why wouldn't I do that with clients?
Yeah.
Like that's the whole point of this, right?
Right.
That's what we're doing it for, right? The relationship, the rapport, and then you get paid sometimes.
Yeah.
But
That's just a bonus.
yeah, that's just like the perk of the business. So anyway, but so I go in with that mentality every time. with a buyer, especially a first-time home buyer, because they don't know.
Right.
I remember when I bought my home, I was 21.
Oh, so you bought a home early.
I did.
Like
I did.
historically early.
Yeah.
It is, because I was married at 18.
Mm-hmm.
We rented for a little while, and then we found this home we loved. We didn't know how to buy it. I worked in mortgage, but I'd never bought a house.
Right.
Just because I knew how lenders sold their loans didn't mean that I knew how to buy a house.
Yep.
And so I always try to put myself in their shoes and remember how nervous I was, how scared I was.
How uneducated the general public is.
Super uneducated. So, that's the mentality I have going in. And I'm very direct with them. I think, so if you were to call me through Zillow and tell me you were a first-time home buyer, I'd say, well, let's meet. A lot of times they say, well, I'm not even qualified. I'm like, so let's sit down and talk.
Right. We gotta start somewhere, like you
Yeah.
said. Yeah, absolutely.
It's like Spider-Man. Everybody gets one.
Yeah.
I'm like, let's do this. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I'm like, come on, let's talk. Let's meet. Let's go meet at the house. It is really hard to get them to your office. I don't know. I mean, because we're in a fast-paced world. Nobody goes to the office anymore for that kind of stuff. Bankers don't, or lenders don't require their consumer to come in and apply for a loan anymore.
Right.
So why should we require them to come in?
And now a lot of time, I mean, like in this immediate world, everybody has now. We have access to Zillow. We have access to Realty.com. Everybody wants immediate access, so why not give it to them? It's there for a reason.
Exactly.
Let's just follow through with that.
That's another point. Every buyer can shop for their own house right now online. So what do we have to offer them?
Yes.
The education, the trust. It's the relationship.
Absolutely.
Zillow will never be able to beat that. And other companies, can I say Zillow on here?
Yeah.
I mean, it's
these
just
are
that.
it's
Same
not a
with,
big
like,
secret.
Redfin and people
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
They're not a big secret,
Yeah, I know. This is true. And they're watching our podcast right now. No. But yeah, I mean, you can't cut out the human touch. It's got to be there.
Absolutely.
Well,
Right.
it's one of the biggest financial decisions 98% of humans will make in their life. And I mean, personally, I know I don't want to just, let's just put 300 grand up in the air and randomly let something happen.
Exactly.
That's bad business. That's bad investment. That's just not good. So, yeah.
For
Absolutely. Yeah.
For sure. So
We
if,
serve our purpose.
The first-time home buyer, they also aren't familiar with loan programs. Even if they've gone online and researched it, they don't know what that means. I mean, there's some stuff I look at and go, well, let me call an expert on that because I'm not the expert on that. I'm not afraid to admit when I don't know something. And that's another thing. When I don't know something, I'm like, you know what? Let me find out.
With someone who's educated.
Yes.
I'm not going to try and put on a front to be Mr. Smarty Pants and then end up looking stupid 5 minutes later.
Yeah.
Right.
And then, because, that's like a just huge disappointment for your client, too, to mislead them. Anyway, not to mention it's dishonest, but, but yeah, so education. So that's what I would do. I would say, let's meet, let's talk, and let's look at the house and see what you think. So we do that. And then in that process, I'm getting to know them. I'm asking them questions, where do you work? Where do you see yourself? Is there anyone else involved in this? Do you have a dog? Do you have a kid?
Yeah.
What do you think about this school district?
Qualifying questions.
Yeah, and sometimes you find out, there's been times where I've had the home buyer and they're like, oh, I don't work. And I'm like, oh, well, probably not going to get in this home.
Yeah.
But we need to work on that.
Right,
We'll figure out what you need to do.
That's right.
But yeah, so there's, and sometimes I find out that, that where their job is. And I'm like, there's another neighborhood that is closer that has everything you need that's just like this neighborhood.
Right.
Are you interested in seeing something like that? But anyway, so then at that point, if they're not qualified, I work to get them qualified. So I will connect them with lenders. And there's so many different lenders out there that are great.
There's like a loan for everybody.
There is, yeah.
There really is.
There is. And there's a loan for me right now. I'm trying to rehab a 100-year-old house because I am crazy. And, you can't just go out and get a regular loan for that.
Yeah.
And
what is a 203K for that?
Well, I could do a 203K, but I would have to sell my home first. and I can't,
Yeah.
So
Right.
anyway,
Right.
it's a debt to income. It's a DTI thing, which is something that first time home buyers aren't
Have
familiar
no
with
idea.
either.
Right,
And
right.
so when you're throwing around acronyms at first time home buyers, yeah, and they may play along with you. Yeah.
Yeah, but
You
they
know.
don't know what you're talking
No,
about.
I mean,
'cause
and it is so hard
I'll
for
be
people
honest,
to.
I
do
did-
you
I
even
did
really
that.
know what you're talking
Yeah.
about?
I'll be honest. I did that whenever we were buying
all
a house.
do stuff like that.
Our realtor was like, "Yeah, do your DTI. They'll check it all out and see if make sure you're qualified to plus your score, your credit score, and see how that." I'm like, just nodding.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then you go home and Google DTI.
Yeah,
Or you
right.
don't even do that. You just hope you're right. You're like, I wonder what that means.
Fill out the loan application. Let me add $5,000 to that.
Right.
Income. They might think that looks good. I mean, people don't. I
Right.
remember when I first bought my house, I was the same way. I'm like, is that enough money? Should I make it look like I make more? No, that's dishonest. Don't do that. And I didn't realize they were checking all of that.
Yeah,
stuff.
they already know.
They get your
anyways.
tax returns.
Right.
They're pulling
You can't
everything.
lie.
That's so true. So, all right. So when we get the process started and you finally get to meet him, you get those qualifying questions in, and you go ahead and start to look for homes.
Yeah.
What is it that when you get? Obviously, you're asking your qualifying questions, but what about when you get more specific with the home itself, like criteria? If there's how many rooms, how updates, stuff that's a fixer upper. Okay, what do you do to get into that part of the conversation?
What do you mean, like?
But as you're
like-
doing that, how are you helping them to get pre-approved? Because that seems like that would be your next step in line.
It is, yeah. So once I don't go any further
yeah.
until we do the approval, because and there's every time you schedule, y'all know what I'm talking about. Every time you schedule a showing for a seller, that seller gets excited and they get their hopes up, and rightfully so. I mean, because that could be the one.
Most
So
definitely.
if you're out there doing that with a buyer that you have no idea if they can buy it,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a waste of time for everybody. It's a waste of time for the buyer, a waste of time for the seller, and a waste of our time
Yeah,
and the other agent.
So we were kind of talking about that a little earlier, was the fact that there's two sides to everything. Obviously, it's not just obviously we will be directly working with buyers or sellers, or sometimes even both. But there is two sides to everything, and
There
kind
is.
of having that pre-approval for them is not only for yourself, so that you have a upper hand when it comes to purchasing a home, but it also goes the other way around, so you're not wasting other people's time, and
Right.
obviously we know that you're qualified to
You
go
got a
and
little
purchase.
skin in the game at that point.
Yeah.
Since we don't do earnest money anymore, really. I mean, that's just the new earnest money is your pre-qual.
It really is.
Especially right now with the market we're in.
And, yeah, the market is nuts. I mean, you're trying to beat offers the first hour that a home goes on the market. How many people can show the house in the first 2 hours?
No
I mean,
joke.
it's like people rushing, is it John Mulaney? Is that guy's
John
name?
Mulaney, the
Where he's always
comedian?
making jokes where the
Yeah.
agents are looking at each other and shaking their shoulders, like, hi, Greg, hi, Ted, or whatever their names
Yeah.
are. But I mean, clearly some of us might be like that, but not all of us are like that. And that's another thing I discovered too, is that agents really work well together. When I first got in this business, I'm like, ooh, it's so cutthroat. And
Yeah.
I was like jealous of all the people that really sell. I'm like, someday I'm going to be in that list, which I am, by the way. But, I started admiring them and like wanting to, like calling them and saying, what are you doing? Give me some insight. Like, I wanted to find out what they do. And then I realized that they're serving their clients. They're actually doing
Right.
something meaningful.
Right.
And so, all those top
It's bigger than
agents.
themselves.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
It doesn't just fall in your lap.
Yes. And it's not in vain. It's not an
No,
effort in vain.
No.
I mean, if you go in with the mentality that you're waiting on a paycheck, then you'll never
gonna
make it in
lose
this
every
business.
time. That's
Yeah,
right.
you will never make it.
That's right.
But anyway, back on track. What were we?
So we're talking about
So-
getting into the appraisal,
yeah.
or not appraisal.
No, we've
The
got them
approval process.
pre-approved. After we've got them
Yes.
pre-approved, what do you do after that?
That's when we really start doing the digging and the research, especially in today's market. There are, I'm working with several buyers right now that we're actually looking at off-market properties.
Yeah.
And so,
Same here.
yeah, and there's nothing wrong with calling up a homeowner and saying, hey,
I was gonna say,
I've
yeah,
got an
kind of-
approved buyer.
Kind of
That
explain
can
a little
end
bit
up-
what do you mean by off-market property?
Oh, yeah, sorry. A home that's not on the market.
Right. So basically,
Self-explanatory.
so
Yeah.
with
But we
the
had-
fact of the lack of inventory that we have now, now, where some of us are converting to having to speak to
We are.
homeowners that have a home that fits the criteria of our buyers.
Yes.
So what we're doing is we're going in and we're seeing that, you know what, hey, I have a buyer that's interested in a home in your area that's like your house. Would you be willing to sell your home? What's your price?
Right.
So it's kind of going into that.
And you would be surprised how many people say, well, I was thinking about listing my house next year or in a few months. Or some people get mad, you know, and then I tell them, like, don't worry, nobody's forcing this on you, you know.
I'm doing that right now. We've lost out on a few battles, and at this point they can't find what they like, so I said, you drive around, find what you like. I'll pull their number up on tax card, I'll find it, I'll call them, and because it could end up being a win-win-win for everybody. You never know.
Absolutely.
The worst they're gonna do, like you said, is get aggravated and hang up on you and then not use you when they sell their house in the future. But oh well, they weren't going to anyways.
Yeah, it's like, I'm sorry I was trying to sell your house for you a year ahead of time with a buyer, and you wouldn't have to pay all this extra fees and commission, but yeah, I mean, you know, who knows? But anyway, what is that program right now that is it the iBuyer programs?
Yeah, the iBuyer.
Where, you know, they're charging huge fees to these sellers on top of those things.
Really?
So,
I didn't get too deep into it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know a lot about them. I've been doing a little bit of research just to see what we're up against. And, you know,
it's going to cost people more.
It is.
And you get less. It just doesn't make sense. It won't work.
It doesn't.
It won't work.
And you're taking out the human contact in the relationship.
That's 90% of what we're doing here. I mean, you know, it just won't work.
Exactly.
I mean, even when you have, like, I've had overseas buyers, I mean, they want to be on FaceTime every time. Like, at least know you're real. You know what I mean? They're not just like on a live chat. Yeah, man, I'll buy it. Let me wire you $250,000.
Yeah, so awkward.
Absolutely. So if we're getting into the home search process, how would you recommend somebody to kind of give you like their do's and don'ts? Or the must and must have.
I'm pretty direct about it. I'm like, listen, you need a fenced yard. What do you want? You know, do you need a 2-car garage? Because if you settle for a 1-car garage, you're going to be upset when your kid turns 16 and has to park their car outside.
And then you're going to be mad at me.
Yes. And the scariest thing, I'll go into that in a minute. I always get off track. Okay, but yeah, I mean, I actually put it in writing to myself. I make a profile on that buyer.
There you go.
And so that I can keep up with exactly what they want. And then the minute that if we're calling homeowners, and you know, that's difficult, we still do it. But if something pops on that market, I check the market. I mean, I'm a weirdo about it. My husband's like, you're obsessed. And, but I probably look at it every hour.
That's how you win.
Yes.
That's right.
That's how you stay educated.
Yes. HomeSnap and Movado are my best friends. I've realized Movado is like I think they're the most live.
Yeah.
They're fast, man.
I don't know about Movado yet, though.
Like,
I gotta get on that.
5 minutes of something hitting
Nice.
the MLS, it goes on, and it's easier to look at on your phone than you know when.
True, yeah. Hey, automated, baby, automated.
I know.
Everywhere we go,
What
we
was
need that.
it?
We need it now.
What was some coach was saying? Man, buyers can just buy a house online. They can see everything. I don't know why you think you're so special unless you're providing a good service. You're not doing anything for them.
That's right.
And he goes, and by the way, he goes, you have to log in to look at what got listed. They don't. I'm like,
it's so true.
right.
It's so true. God dang.
I know. But we're doing it. We're
what are we doing
syndicating
here?
it. I know. What are we doing? Really? No.
No, but so
This is a great thing, obviously,
course.
that consumers
Yeah,
can go.
definitely.
And it helps us, too, because then we can see what they want.
right.
And I tell my clients, I'm like, go to this site and this site because it's the most accurate and live. And
Zillow's probably live.
Right, yeah. And I'm like, and if you see something, let me know. And we're going to go. I'm like, I want you to look at it and I'm going to look at it. And I get them set up on alerts through our software. Mm-hmm. We have an amazing platform here at Edge that we can do that with. And so set them up on alerts. I feel like our alerts might be quicker than some of the other online alerts because we're so, everything's more on a live timeline.
Yeah. Shout out to KV Core for that one. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I know my clients have mentioned that they get alerts quicker than the other ones. I'm not going to say.
If you put them in Collab Center, it's dang near is the same with that, like the response time to it.
Yep.
Right on,
Yeah, I
right
do
on.
like using collab. That's writing caramels
Yeah.
for sure.
All right.
But-
So whenever you're in that situation where you're looking for the homes, you start seeing different homes, maybe even start showing them different homes. What's your process in showing them a home or trying to get them to understand the market as well too and what they're seeing? You know,
Yeah.
How do you help them narrow it down?
Yeah.
That's a really good question. I mean, it's ultimately up to them.
Well, yeah.
And so I try to let them navigate, I guess.
Keep in mind, this is about first-time home buyers too. Not
Oh
all
yeah,
buyers.
yeah,
yeah,
okay,
yeah, for
okay,
sure,
good
yeah,
point,
yeah.
good point.
It's a little different with them.
That's true.
Gotta hold their hand.
I mean, as far as narrowing it down,
Maybe not even narrowing it down as much as just giving them
the
the guidance.
budget,
Just
the
guide them
budget
and
is
giving
the
them-
biggest
yeah.
thing
Yeah.
because first-time home buyers go in with these
High and mighty.
big dreams of home ownership, and they go in looking at things. They want to see things that are around 15 or 20,000 over their approval, and then I have to tell them, okay, this is the real world. This is not HGTV, and
Yeah.
so we're not. I mean, HGTV shows was listed for 150K, got it for
Right.
120, and I'm like, that does
Right.
not happen in real life. The
Right.
sellers have a net goal. They have a mortgage to pay off. They have closing costs to pay. They're probably going to pay around 3.5 or 4% of your closing costs, and then they have to have something to put towards their new home.
That's
So
right.
let's be real here. Most agents have listed this home at around 5 to 10%. I mean, there's a little bit of room there, but I mean, it's mostly what they need. And so they
right.
can't move unless they get a good offer.
Right, so that's kind of going back to what we were talking about before about having both sides.
Right.
Not only do the buyers have like their financial responsibilities, but so does the sellers. And
Yeah.
that's moving forward as well too, because not only are they selling their home, but they're having to find another one at that moment in time. Which right now is almost weird because that's even scarcer to do that. And I think that's a big reason why inventory is so low is because of the fact that there is nowhere really else to go as far as finding a home
Right.
unless you have something that you're already building or someone specifically that is selling their home as well too, and maybe moving out of
Exactly.
state.
Right?
So maybe
Yeah.
you get that type of scenario that's lucky. Now, going into the home search, what are some things that you kind of guide them to look out for whenever you're actually in the home, as far as like maybe some certain problems, maybe certain areas, stuff like that?
On the areas, I tell them if a lot of people get concerned about safety and that kind of stuff, and I send them to a website that provides reports for them on that. But then if I am in a home, say for example, I see a 45-degree angle crack in the door frame or something. Are we?
Sorry.
I'm like,
No, we're good.
I'm
Sorry,
like,
I was
there's a big crack in this wall, so there's probably maybe we have a little pier and beam issue. I mean, so yeah, I actually tell my buyers, I'm like, you guys look around, because I call it new house eyeballs. And some of my clients laugh about it, but I'm like, no, I'm serious.
It's
You
true.
guys are
This-
not going to see all this stuff, and I will see it. And so I will point out all the bad to you. And my clients like that too. I mean, and that also helps develop trust.
And
you
also
know?
with that, I mean, not only are you're showing them the bad stuff, but you can, with your experience, you have a way to fix it, a solution.
Absolutely,
So-
yeah. And I will say there's been homes that I did find like the crack in the wall, or maybe there's a couple in the door frames or whatever, and I'm like, let's negotiate on the front end. They really wanted the house. There was one in Deer Creek that I sold last year that had that issue, and I said, listen, this has got to be fixed. If you guys really want this house, we'll write it in on the front end that it's contingent upon a foundation inspection, and then we'll go from there. Whatever they find, they did find that it needed some work done, and so we negotiated that, and they closed, and it was great. Everything, the work was completed, and everything's fine.
Good, and they'd be surprised how much you can actually negotiate into a deal.
yeah.
Oh yeah,
It's really
it
actually
was a $1,500 fix,
yeah.
which is compared to some things, not that bad.
Right.
That's
And
cheap.
there's times now where we can actually tie that into closing, so where it doesn't have, nobody has to come out of pocket with it. You know what I mean? It comes out of net from the home, so that's always great. Now going into I just lost my train of thought. Dagnabbit. Goodness gracious, I just had it too. We okay. So going into I guess like saying they your buyers have found a home and there's something that they really really want, and what would you in this market right now, because right now we are in a seller's market, and it's not your normal seller's market, but we are definitely in a seller's market, mainly because of the fact that we have a lack of inventory, and the pandemic has scared people from being able to leave. So what do you give to your? Actually, let me rephrase that. How do you give your buyers the upper hand going into a negotiation?
There's lots of things that we can take into consideration. If they have a lot of money saved back and they're comfortable with their budget and comfortable with their mortgage payment, a lot of times I'll say, listen, you saved up $25,000 to put down on the house, but you qualify for a 5% down conventional loan product. So why don't you take the rest and use that to pay your closing costs? And we use that as a negotiating tool. Also, home warranties. I tell them, I'm like, listen, you can buy a home warranty, pick your company right after you close. I did on my house. That's what I did. But you don't have to ask the seller to pay for the home warranty. That's something you can get later on, or, right after you purchase the home or whatever. But it's a great negotiating tool because it saves the seller $600 to $700 on the front end. And every penny counts for a seller.
Absolutely.
And so I tell my buyers that too. I'm like, listen, I'm just going to be direct with you. Here's what you need to do to get this house. Because all of your competition, they don't have $25,000 saved up like you do. You got the upper hand. Even if you have if you have $5,000 saved up.
Yeah.
You're good.
Right.
I mean, especially if you are using a USDA loan product or a VA loan and you're not having to come up with a down payment, then take that $5,000 and use it towards your closing costs. And so I tell them, I'm like, consider it carefully, take an hour or whatever you need on the drive home, talk about it, go to dinner, and call me. If it's 10 o'clock at night and you're like, you know what, let's do it, I'm going to get up out of bed and write an offer.
Yeah, most definitely.
That's what I do. Because the people, what is it they say? The person that says they're going to sleep on it, I always say, well, that someone slept on it last night and they're probably writing an offer today.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's the truth though.
That is totally true. Absolutely.
It really is.
Absolutely.
I mean, I've had so many buyers miss out because they didn't want to make a quick decision.
Right.
And sometimes you have to.
Right. Sometimes you have to. I mean, and other times, if it's too much to handle at the time, obviously we don't want them to have to feel that way. But I mean, we want to give you every chance possible to
give them the
get
facts.
what you want.
Yeah, give them the facts. Tell them everything you know. I always try to gather as much information about the property, and as much information from the agent too about what's going on, so that I can give that to my buyer so they can make an informed decision. I also run comps on the house just to make sure that we're doing good. There is nothing more disappointing than everyone getting so close to closing and that appraisal coming in and something's wrong.
Right.
I mean, and it's, sometimes it behooves the seller, but true. Not the seller, but the buyer.
Buyers, yeah.
But still, but it can kill a deal too,
Most definitely.
And so I always like to let the buyers know, hey, here's what every house in the neighborhood has sold for over the last 6 months or the last year, depending on where it's at. Sometimes we have to go back a little further. I do not like going back a year, but sometimes. But just so they know what they're getting into.
Definitely.
And the more information they have, the better and more comfortable they are making a decision too.
Most definitely. You empower that information for
yes.
them. Empower that decision for them.
I'm a firm believer in second showings too.
So going into all right. So say in a perfect world, your offer is accepted. You did the comps on the house and on that market, and it comes at fair market value. What's next?
So we're under contract?
You're under contract.
All right. Okay. So at that point, I actually have on the front end, I have a pamphlet that I send out also, but I have this, we're under contract, what's next? So I send it out to them and we go over it. And it's a breakdown of all of the steps because they're going to get those weird, wacky phone calls from the title company going, I need your social security number.
Yeah, yeah.
And, it just freaks people out. I mean, this day and age, there's so much. Yeah. And so, they get those phone calls and sometimes they forget, like if I went over it with one spouse and they didn't tell the other,
right,
then the other spouse gets the phone call.
Yeah.
And then they call me and they're like, I got this weird phone call. Should I trust them? I'm like, yes, I'm so sorry. But yeah, so preparing them for how that process goes. I'm like, listen, now your lender is going to call you and tell you they need your W-2s. And if they haven't gotten that already, sometimes they have. But sometimes we just go in with that pre-qualifier real quick. And then once we shift that contract back over to the lender and the escrow company and get everything rolling, that's when the lender goes, oh, I need to get my stuff rolling. Yep. I need W-2s and tax returns and
I need to make sure you can afford
your firstborn child and,
right.
yeah. And so I tell them, I'm like, listen, the lender's fixing to ask you some serious personal questions. They're going to want to see all your personal financial statements and your everything. They're going to want to look at your bank accounts. They're going to see what your debt to income ratio is. Hopefully they've already done that. But anyway, I said, do you have any judgments against you? Because title's going to find all that stuff. Just because it didn't show up on your credit report doesn't mean that there's not a lien filed against you at the courthouse.
And that's the other thing too. Always disclose that up front.
Absolutely.
Because if not, they're going to find out anyways. But they are. But the problem is what arises when you don't disclose it
when they find out 3 days before closing.
Something that starts backing things up. So so that can be really for everybody.
Yeah, and that's really tough, especially if on the front end. I had a client. She was a first-time home buyer, and we were about a week in under contract, and title came back, and there was a judgment. So I called her, and she said, "Well, I didn't think about that because I'm making monthly payments. I don't have anything outstanding. I'm in good standing with them." And that showed up on my credit report as a revolving line of credit. And so I didn't think anything of it. I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense,
Yeah, it's
to her, that was fine. Right. I mean, because she's a buyer peer. General people don't know anything about judgments. Right. Really, they don't.
They don't, yeah.
I mean, if it's not their gig and they're not working in this field or working in another field where they're familiar with what that is, they don't know what that is. Yep. And that's why attorneys exist to,
Yeah, even down to real estate attorneys. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So, in her defense, she had no idea that was going to be an issue. In her eyes, she's doing everything right. She's making on-time payments. But then I discovered something. The more I dug, and this may have been the title person in me, but I looked at the judgment and I thought, this judgment should have been paid off a long time ago. If she's making this amount of payments at this interest, this should have been taken care of.
The truth comes out.
Yes. So I found out that they accidentally, they double charged her.
No
it was
way.
Actually paid off like 5 years prior.
You did this lady an insane service.
Yes. So then I called, and of course the company, I'm not going to name the bank, they were, kind of caught in the middle of it, and they were embarrassed. And I told them if they didn't expedite a release deed that I was going to call the CFPB. And I hated to be that way because they were kind of argumentative about me or with me. But at the end of the day, I sent them all of the documentation and I said, maybe this was just an accounting oversight. And, whatever you're trying to pull, let's just make it right. And filed the release. And they did.
Good.
And she was able to move forward.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And imagine if you didn't catch that, or if you didn't even take the time to kind of just be like,
I wanted to dig on it.
Let's look at this. Yeah. What's going on here? Just sounds a little fishy. Let me see what's up.
Yeah, looked weird.
She would have kept paying it.
Yeah,
Life referrals.
That's
right. Referrals.
Yes.
That's right. Okay, so we've got that process going.
We've stepped into the home inspection.
Yes. So.
My favorite part. Not my favorite part, really. I'm being facetious. The inspection. Love it. Got to be there. I always have to be there. There have been a few times where I haven't been, but I like to be there and see everything. And I tell my clients, if something comes back, if it's a big ticket item that's really scary for them, I'm like, okay, let's do what you need to do that you feel that you need to do if we can't get them to fix it. But they always want me to tell them, what needs to be fixed.
Right.
Tell me what to fix.
Yeah, and I'm like,
I can't tell you. I can
Right.
suggest.
yes, and that's what I'm like. I'm like, listen, if you move in this house, and I told you not to fix the leaky sink, and then you're in there one day, and the handle flies off, and all the water flies everywhere, and
Your house
it
floods.
ruins your house, you're gonna call me.
Right.
I said, do you want that to happen? I don't.
So
And
what
then
do you tell them in those instances, like as far as making sure that they're the ones that are making
Protected.
the actual decision, making the right decision.
Yeah, I tell them,
empower them with it as far as.
yeah, I tell them to look at the list, go with what you're comfortable with. If you want everything on this list done, we will ask for it, whether the seller does it or not.
Right.
And you know what? 9 times out of 10, the seller doesn't. It's usually little piddly things that are important to the buyer
But
that the seller has dealt with for 10 years and not even thought about.
They already have it on their to-do list.
yeah.
It may already
Always.
be done.
Yes, and that happens a lot. But or they are like, oh yeah, that leaky sink that we just ignored for the last 10 years. It's never bothered us, but if they want it fixed, we'll fix it. No big deal.
Yeah. We knew it would need to be fixed at some point.
Yes, yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
A lot of the times it works out in their favor. And if it doesn't, guess what? They're going to come back with their list that they're willing to fix.
Yes, exactly.
So it's not
Yeah.
like they're going to be like, get out of here. Yeah.
It's always negotiable.
Exactly.
Everything you
Yes.
keep going is always
So yeah,
negotiable.
that's what I tell them. I'm like, if you want to ask for everything on this list, I'm not going to put an asterisk by what you really need to ask for. You don't want to scare the seller. I will honestly say that that first year I was selling real estate, I had that mentality. I'm like, oh my gosh, if we ask for this, they'll probably terminate on you. I mean, I had that mentality. And it was, I think it was JC I was talking to one day, and he's like, no. He's like, no. I'm like, what? What do I do? And he goes, if they want to put everything on that list, you do it.
We do
Right.
what they want.
Yes,
That's our job.
and
Even if
I'm like,
is
isn't it my job to
outrageous.
advise them? And he goes, advise them not to get a repair. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. You know,
Exactly.
that's,
You have to step
you know,
back and look at it from that angle, because a lot of
Yes.
the times it's just you put yourself in their shoes and the seller's shoes and the selling agent. You put yourself in everybody's shoes, and then
Right.
you kind of sometimes step away from focusing on what you're truly there for, to try and help everybody because you want to be a good person.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
And
And
a lot
we
of- a
have,
lot of-
we have, oh, go ahead, I'm
No,
sorry.
no, no,
I
yeah,
was going to say, we
yeah.
have these great working relationships with other agents. And at the end of the day, we want everyone to be happy. We want the seller to be happy, the agent that we work well with, because we know we're going to be doing future transactions with them. This is about a network and about helping people.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Right.
The last
I'm
thing
sorry.
I want to
No,
do
no, you had it right on the nail.
is
Right
walk
on
into
the head.
Walmart and see an agent, and didn't work out
I
well with,
know.
and then you're just like, "Grr."
I had this, I felt so bad. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but while I was sick with COVID,
There's a glass between
I
us,
had a
it's okay.
deal. I know. Yeah. Don't
just
worry.
can't see
I'm
it.
negative. I tested negative twice. Anyway, now I didn't.
Edit.
I did a month ago. But anyway, so while I was sick, I had a deal close. Of course, I was on the phone with my seller as much as possible. She was very understanding that I couldn't leave the home. And so, but anyway, I know that buyer's agent was.
Like,
He just, but when the last text message he sent to me, he goes, I know you're tired of hearing from me. And I'm like, oh no, he thinks I'm tired of hearing from
I
him.
thought it was the other way.
So I told him, I said, I have COVID. I said I didn't want to make a big announcement. That's why I can't leave the house and do anything for you. I said, you're not bothering me, I swear. And if I have made you think that, I'm sorry, because I am completely delirious because I'm running 103 fever and I have no idea what I've said to you.
I think I'm talking into a potato right
Yes,
now.
I do. Yes, thank you. Hi, Mr. Potato.
All right, so that's a whole other conversation for another time as well.
Oh,
too,
yeah, yeah.
So let's-
talking your whole experience. I wish you wrote everything down during that experience, by the way. And I would.
Oh,
love
my
to read
husband
that.
can tell you all about it.
I'm gonna have to sit down.
He
with
was
him.
stuck in quarantine
I'm
with
gonna have
me.
to sit down with him. Yes, absolutely.
That's an episode on its own.
know.
Yes,
there.
absolutely. All right. Okay, so throughout the whole time, I mean, you're under contract. The inspection's been done.
You've addressed the
addressed
repairs.
repairs.
Yes.
Now
and-
the appraisal's next. Well, I guess we're waiting on it more.
We're
Well,
waiting
well,
on
not
it.
only that,
yeah.
but what's your process?
But in the interim, I'm
Yeah,
calling
yeah.
people, following up, and making sure that they have, buyers tend to get a little caught up in life sometimes. There's, kids and practice and work and
easy
life.
to forget.
Yes. And so they kind of go, well, I'll get to those tax returns and W-2s and all that stuff the lender needs next week or in a couple of days. And a couple of days turns into more couple of days, blah, 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 blah. So it's better just to stay on everybody, not stay on. That sounds terrible. But stay, and so contact the loan officer and say, hey, do you have everything you need? Actually, no, I'm glad you called. I need this and this. Okay, I'll call the buyer and remind them real quick that that's what they need. And the buyer's grateful for it too because they forget.
Right.
So that's my job to make sure as the agent that everybody has got what they need and that everything is going smoothly. I always want to review the title commitment because I wrote policies for years and I like to see those title commitments. But that's, but you also want to look at the title commitment because I will honestly tell you, title companies get really busy too. They're closing deals left and right.
Yeah.
And so sometimes they don't look at a title commitment right when they get it. They look at it a week later when there's an issue on it that could have been resolved immediately.
Right.
So it's really important to stay with everybody, make sure everybody's on the same page. And so get those updates weekly from everybody involved in the transaction. A lot of hands in it, so you got to know what everybody's doing.
Definitely. And that's one of the big things that a lot of people miss about what we actually do as well too.
Oh, yeah.
But okay, so the what about going into the appraisal process?
So I don't really worry about the appraisal unless the lender calls me and says we have an issue. And then it's comps. I get with the listing agent. I'm like, I need your comps. I'm going to run comps. We need to figure this out. If the appraisal comes back in low or has a repair condition, of course, we work to renegotiate if we have to or get that done. Most repair conditions are pretty simple on, typically. So that's not a problem normally. And then, but renegotiating a price can be a problem.
Yes.
The closing I have tomorrow, $10,000 difference from the list price versus the appraised price.
Okay, can I be that guy?
I wish I could have got
I had one in December that was $20,000.
No.
I had one that I determined it on last month. That was $30,000.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
There's a conspiracy here.
10, 20,
Appraisers
30.
are talking to each other a lot. Like, we're going to make this market.
Yeah, that's right.
No.
I would
Just
not
kidding,
look
appraisers. I love you.
Looking from the outside.
I'll send you cookies.
Mr.
No.
Burns.
Yeah.
All right, so the appraisal comes back in a perfect world. We're good to go.
Yeah.
And then what's happens after that?
What do you do between appraisal and closing? Because at that point you're out the door.
Right.
Basically.
If there were any repairs too, though, in that meantime, I stay on top of the repairs, and that's that week, that stretch that we have. Typically, I like to say that week. Sometimes the appraisal comes in the day before closing, and the underwriter signs all. But I mean, usually we have that window, so that's when I really dig in on the repairs, and I'm like, I need invoices. What do we have done? I need to show the buyer what's been done. Sometimes, if it's a big repair, we go on over and see the progress or make sure that it's done. There's nothing worse than, I've learned my lesson, doing a final walkthrough the night before the 8:30 a.m. closing
can be a mistake.
and none of the repairs are done.
Yep.
Goodness gracious.
Yep. And then you
Worst.
And then you sent your people in there that done closed on it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yep.
Yeah.
I gotta come out of pocket. Oh, it's my fault. Oh God.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
or you do that weird, awkward addendum and hope and pray that the repairs get done 7 days post closing, whatever. And I hate that. I've done it, and I learned my lesson on that too.
Because then you get focused on other transactions, and it kind of hits the back burner. And if something goes wrong there, they can just cause a snowball effect.
Yes.
Crap.
And then it worries your buyers. I mean, they just imagine they've been through this whole thing. Losing sleep probably if they're anything like me, and then because when I bought my house I didn't sleep a wink, but so you get to that process and then they go, oh sorry, it's not all done yet, we're going to go ahead and close, you're going to give us all that money, and then we'll get to what you really wanted.
We're sort of promising.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So once we get all the repairs are done, we're good on that. Going into closing. How are you? What do you go through like as far as like scheduling?
Do you have
and
any
like that?
special things you do at closing for your
Special
buyers?
things I do at closing.
Yeah. Well, for your first-time
I
home buyers, I guess. Do you do anything different for them than you would a normal buyer, someone that maybe like a return client?
A lot of times I do the enhanced policy, title policy. It's a small upcharge. It's like a 25% increase. So it's nominal, and it's a really good policy. And so I let the title company explain what all that coverage is, since I'm not a licensed title agent to do that. Yes. But that is a really big deal for a homeowner. And so I do that. And then just a gift, just something, you know, to.
And a hug.
Yeah, always. And then, of course, I'm like, I'll never be out of your life. Now you're stuck with me. You're going to get Christmas cards, phone calls, emails, videos. But
and so that's that building relationship as well too. That's
absolutely
that's the awesome, man. It's not even just following up, because again, like we always say, it's relationship, not transactions.
It is, you know, and a lot of buyers, they remember you for that, and they tell their friends, and
it's a referral business.
It's a referral business.
People forget about that.
Yeah. Right. This is a referral business. I would say about 35% of my business is referral based. And the rest, of course, is online leads, because that is the way of the future. That's
right.
it.
Absolutely. That's true.
And it's getting that way.
More and more.
Yes.
Daily.
Yeah.
Daily.
Well, awesome. So like going through the process, is there something that you would, like, what's a direct message you would give to first time home buyers right now?
In this market.
In this market.
Yeah.
Let's make it even more specific. Little Timmy comes to you and says, "I'm ready to buy a house. My first time." What are you going to tell him?
Don't put all of your money in, because there's a program that will work for you, and so you can save your cash. Don't overbuy. Buy what you are comfortable with.
Don't be house poor.
Yes. If you want to take, and I tell my clients that, I mean, sometimes I will talk them out of a house. And I know that sounds crazy, but they came to me and say they want a $150,000 house. They fall in love with a $200,000 house. And I'm like, you said you wanted to travel. You wanted to put money away for your kids' college.
What happened to those other things?
Yeah, you know, you are going to be miserable trying to pay for this house.
Yep.
And then they're like, you're right. You're right.
It's part of the job.
Yeah.
I'm just here to help.
Yes.
Being realistic, because you want them to be happy.
Yes.
That's the biggest thing. It's
be
not
a
just
real
estate,
real
estate.
I'm happy. I still live in my little $125,000 ranch house.
Right. There you go.
And I tell them that too. I drive a Mercedes.
But
that costs the same as my car or my house. No, I'm just kidding.
But nonetheless, my
yes,
house
yes,
is still
it is. Yes,
yes,
it's my little bitty house on 3 acres.
As long as it gives you shelter, you know, you can shower there, you
exactly.
can eat,
yes.
you know, you're protected, your family, you should be good.
Yeah,
it's your cozy little place. It's got to be your sanctuary.
Granted, if you want to spend $500,000 though, it's cool.
Hey, absolutely.
You
know, and if you're, go ahead. I'm sorry, I was interrupting you.
No, you're good. You're good.
Yeah, if you're there and you can spend $500. Just like when Mercedes kept advertising to me on Facebook, and I'm like, yeah, I do want that. I'll be right there.
How dare you, Facebook, send me something I want more.
I sold a lot of houses this year. Yes, I want it.
Oh, put this money away for investments? No,
no, I'm buying a car.
Well, awesome. Well, hey, this was great. I know I don't want to have to cut it short, but we do have to cut it short, fortunately.
Hey, we're at 54 minutes though.
That's awesome. So
that's
that
perfect
was actually
time.
right around time. It was the same amount of time. Good deal. So we wanted to keep it around an hour. So perfect. Flipping Jennifer, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah. You're welcome.
This
thank
awesome.
you guys.
This will just be the first time of many.
Yeah.
So
we need to do one that is specifically doing real estate with COVID.
Oh,
and go over your 14-day experience in hell.
For sure. Absolutely. For sure.
Totally.
Because especially since you had the deal going. That just
I know. Yeah, well, I'm like laying on the couch with my iPad on my chest. I can't breathe.
I want to see if you watch Parks and Rec.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so were you like Leslie when she had the fever? And then like when she has to actually work, she comes out of it and she's just like, yeah, so today we're going to be going over this. And
totally fine.
And as soon as it's done, she's like, hello, lobster.
Scott said I looked at him and was like, you look so great for like 18 years old. And he's like, I'm not 18 years old. I'm like, but you look like you're 18 years old. And he's like, you're nuts. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but that's what you look like right now.
Sorry, my brain's been cooking for 4 days.
I know.
That's right.
10 days.
Boiling
10 days. I ran between 101 and 103 fever.
God dang.
Yeah, I was cooked.
Everybody's symptoms are so different.
Oh, it's nuts.
Crazy, right?
My closing agent, Crystal, she said like it felt like minor bronchitis.
And
the worst thing that happened to her, she couldn't taste or smell.
Yeah.
That's
but
so
then
weird.
like you're like,
that's how Scott was.
I was dead.
Oh, I
And
was.
I'm like, well, okay.
That's so nuts.
I don't even know anymore.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much for being here. Again, Jennifer Nickerson
You're welcome.
from Edge Realty. My name is Joshua Suarez with Edge Realty as well, too. And behind the boards, you have Tracer Austin.
Woohoo!
So thank you guys for tuning in. And until next time, take care, guys.